I want to introduce you to Janet Dankert, who is our president and CEO there at Community Partnership of the Ozarks.
Thanks, Justin. Hey, I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm really glad that we have the technology that I can be there virtually to be a part of this important event. We are thrilled to have you all here tonight for this important community conversation. At CPO, we've been working with childcare providers and the early childhood sector for more than 20 years. We understand the importance of childcare for our community, for our families, and for our businesses. And we also know that this issue has grown over time and has even been exacerbated by the pandemic. So now we know it's time for solutions, it's time for action. And if anyone can do it, we can. Springfield does it better than any other community in the state. And actually, I've lived all over the country and I've never seen anything like it. So I think we're probably better than most across the country. I'd like to thank the teams from KY3 and the Daily Citizen for highlighting the issue through their incredible series that they ran in July. Hopefully everybody saw all of those pieces because they were truly incredible. Thank you for your work. I'd also like to thank our panelists who are willing to share their wealth of knowledge and expertise with us tonight. I think we're going to have a great conversation and I'm really excited to hear it. So I will get us started by welcoming David Steffler to give some opening remarks. David returned to Springfield last fall to lead the startup of the Springfield Daily Citizen, our community's newest digital news source. The Daily Citizen is a nonprofit news organization focused on in-depth coverage of public affairs issues, as well as providing a daily slice of life in the Queen City. It's officially launched 6 months ago, and David is the president and CEO. Many of you will remember him from his time as executive editor of the News Leader, where he led the paper's Every Child reporting project and was active in community affairs. Please help me welcome David Steffler.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you all for joining us tonight for this important conversation about the complex issues and the high stakes that are involved in both the availability and affordability of childcare in our community. We hope that you'll walk away tonight, probably not with a silver bullet, although I've asked the panelists to offer a few, but we hope you'll be able to walk away and take back to your workplaces some ideas that you and your organization can undertake to help address this issue. The future growth of our economy may depend on finding solutions. We're grateful to the panelists and for our friends at the Community Partnership of the Ozarks for their involvement in organizing this event and helping us, both of our news organizations, with the series. Special thanks to Janet and also to Dana Carroll for all of their insights and leadership. I also want to take a moment to thank some others who helped make tonight possible. First of all, our friends here at the E-Factory, Rachel Anderson, Paige Oxendine, Melissa Hamilton, and Kim Dixon. Also special thanks to the folks at Big Mamas. They provided the treats for tonight. Larnell Foster and Joe Terry were involved there. And special thanks to my colleagues at the Daily Citizen, Chief Development Officer Judy Kamian, Lindsay McDaniel, and Shannon K. Bowers for helping set everything up, along with the folks here from CPO. This past spring, we met with Brian McDonough, the general manager at KY3, and with Bridget Lavelle, the news director, and talked about what were some issues where we might have a mutual interest in doing some in-depth reporting. And this topic was chief among the topics that we discussed. They were enthusiastic, and I think that we both see this as something where we bring something to the table. We each have our unique skills. We have the power of in-depth reporting. We have the ability to produce great stories in text, in photos, in graphics, and in video. But we also share, besides having those skills, we also share some mutual values, a belief that good journalism can bring a light and help people understand complex issues, and also a belief in the power of journalism for good and the ability to make change in the community more possible. This community values collaboration. And obviously, we think that the collaboration between KY3 and the Daily Citizen helps feed into that value for collaboration. But it's going to be up to all of you to actually take the next step in this process. I want to acknowledge, first of all, the team from the Daily Citizen that was involved in producing our great journalism, Brittany Meiling, our managing editor, Jackie Raywald and Corey Madison, along with graphics and photo help from Shannon K. Bowers, who's over on the side, and freelance photographer Jim Wilson. And then finally, I'm going to introduce the dynamic duo from KY3 that produced so many in-depth stories over the course of evening newscasts for 6 nights. Ashley Reynolds and Elizabeth Van Metre. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Ashley for a couple of brief remarks and introducing a short video to highlight some of the things that you learned in the series. On your chairs was this handout that includes links to the coverage from both KY3 and the Daily Citizen. So here you go.
Kind of nervous to hold a mic. Don't do this. Hey, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's so nice to see just people here, especially when Hanson is in town. So I'm pretty impressed. I learned a lot from this. I got back from maternity leave and my boss said, hey, guess what? You're going to do a series about childcare. So it got personal real quick. I started looking at daycares, I think 2nd trimester, and it was a nightmare, honestly. They were booked, and thank the Lord, my mom retired, and we have grandparents that are willing to shuffle, and we have flexibility in our family, and thank goodness I'm from here, and my family's here, and we're making it work. So we feel very fortunate in that. I also want to point out we can solve this. I mean, there are so many ideas out there. There's funding out there. Maintaining it is going to be the issue, I think. But look at what other cities have done. We're trying to figure out what works for us, and we can look to other places and see what's going on there. So without further ado, this is my coworker, Elizabeth Van Metre, and our desks are just a few feet apart, and we share a lot of baby stories these days. So,
I'm a new mom too, and I have a 10-month-old, and even we talk about this, but even putting this together, this was on top of our daily work. And so that meant more hours with, and that meant my son came to interviews with me to talk about the childcare crisis because I didn't have childcare available those days or that time period. So it really did hit home for us, and we learned a lot. So yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if you were viewing it or can I touch it?
As of right now, at the places I've interviewed, the soonest they could get a child in is the summer of 2023.
We have never had such a wait list.
Rhonda Anderson from Parkcrest Daycare and Preschool says infant and toddler wait lists are the longest. The center averages 12 calls a day, people hoping they have a spot.
Parents call crying because they cannot find infant care.
If you can find a spot, can you really pay the price?
We have paid up to $220 a week per child.
That's more than $34,000 a year for childcare.
Know of like 3 places here, and some are 2 and up. So that means you can't even take your babies there.
They're closing faster than we can reopen them. We have to place a priority on this that we have not done.
Doors close because very few people want to work these jobs. Low pay and usually no benefits. The average childcare employee makes around $11 an hour.
Retail centers around here even sometimes pay better. You know, McDonald's pays better.
Why is childcare so expensive, but yet workers make so little? Well, think of it like these rings. You can only have so many rings on one toy. It's just like the law. You can only have so many kids for each worker. Profits are limited by the number of kids. Just like I can't squeeze any more rings on here.
Despite the struggles here, the doors are open. The biggest blessing? It's rent-free. Messiah Lighthouse does not pay for rent or utilities. The church covers it.
But if we had to pay all that stuff, it would just be very hard to still be here.
I think it's been a huge blessing for the associates here at Prime to not have to worry about where their kids are going to go. We have parents come down, feed their babies. They'll eat lunch with their kids, read them books. It's just nice.
What's a dinosaur say?
Roar. Cox Health invests about $1 million every year to keep these centers going.
That is a heavy, heavy cost and burden. Not all employers, have the ability or budget to do that. But that's where maybe we can connect them to providers.
There's now more money available, $10 million for Missouri businesses to start up childcare centers for their workers.
An issue that impacts everybody that shares this great state with us. Last year alone, our economy lost out on $1.35 billion of revenue because parents couldn't enter into the workforce.
It's only a one-time thing, but if successful,
then I will be more than happy to continue to work with Representative Fogel and make sure that we make this an annual appropriation.
it's a start to finding possible solutions.
All right. Well, thank you, Ashley and Elizabeth, for that impactful video. I think that gives us even more to think about and talk about and discuss. So I'm truly excited to get the conversation started. So it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, although I honestly don't feel like I need to because I'm sure everyone knows him, but I will do that because we need to do that. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jim Anderson. Jim served as the president of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce for almost 27 years. Most of you probably know that. Following his retirement from the chamber in 2014, he served as vice president of marketing, corporate communications, and public affairs for Cox Health for 6 years. Now retired, Jim stays busy serving on boards of several organizations and moderating panels. So Jim, take it from here. Thank you.
Janet, thank you very much. And sorry you're not with us in person, but we appreciate you joining us virtually this evening to provide those special introductions and certainly the overview from Community Partnership of the Ozarks. One of the boards I am privileged to serve on is Springfield, a Daily Citizen, and certainly privileged also to be your moderator this evening on a very important topic. In my mind, the focus this evening is the challenge facing the child care business model and how lack of availability is impacting the hiring efforts of many local businesses. And certainly goals I would have for our next hour and 15 minutes or so is increasing awareness from the business community of the critical needs and hopefully mobilizing towards action. In particular, I think we need to focus attention on the fact that child care centers in our community are operating well below capacity due to the shortage of child care workers, in large part because of low pay. I also think one of our goals should be identify businesses in large part to provide financial support to address the lack of capacity. And there's a lot of ways, subsidies, other steps, perhaps providing benefits, other areas of opportunity I think we're going to talk about this evening. And certainly I want us to generate some conversation around the need for a better centralized one-stop source of information for parents seeking childcare in our community. And I think we'll be able to do that this evening as well. We certainly have a blue ribbon gold standard group of panelists with us this evening. And you know them, I know, and know of them and know certainly what they do, but they are going to provide some superstar status this evening as we address this important issue. And let me introduce them, and I'll start my far left up to Dana, and then we will let each of them provide a brief opening statement, and then we'll address some critical questions that will come up in their statement as well as questions on all of our minds. So first, Chrissy Schell, Executive Vice President of Human Resources at SRC. Next to Chrissy is Diane Rozier, Director of Human Resources and Safety, CNH Reman. Next to Diane is Sally Payne, Director of Workforce Development for our community. And next to Sally is Jennifer Crouch, Early Childhood Center Director at OTC. And next to me is Dana Carroll, Vice President of Early Childhood and Family Development at Community Partnership of the Ozarks. I know you are waiting to applaud this superstar panel, so let's do that right now, because I think that'd be a good way to begin. It's a great group. It is a great group. And Sally, if you don't mind, let's start with you, because I think you can frame the issue certainly well, and then we will take it from there. Sally Payne.
Well, you're making me really nervous with Blue Star, Blue Ribbon, like super, like that's a lot of pressure.
Oh, it
but-
was a gold star, gold standard, and blue, yeah, blue ribbon, but that works. That works.
But okay. Yeah, and I think the video laid it out really, really nicely for all of us. You know, childcare is an economic development issue. It's a workforce development issue. I mean, women contribute significantly to GDP, and GDP is significantly down due to the lack of women in the workforce. But I also can't leave out single dads and foster families as well. I want to make sure everybody's covered, but it is a attraction and retention issue that all employers have been, you know, struggling with since this very strange, erratic economy took place, and we're still in it. And frankly, I think we're going to be here for a while. You know, for the provider, this is their business, so it's a business issue. And you know, the reality is the childcare industry or sector supports every other industry because it's supporting those workers. I mean, you know, we've got two manufacturers here. Their workforce, you know, not maybe everybody, but largely, you know, is dependent on childcare. So when you have an industry that supports every other industry, this becomes a community industry. And I will say, you know, the nation as a whole is struggling. It's not exclusive to Missouri or Southwest Missouri or Greene County. It's a nationwide issue, as you know, I've talked to other states. But and the reality is the return on investment is higher, you know, ages 0 to 3, which is significantly harder to place. And, you know, there's a greater slot disparity for that age group. That return on investment is greater from 0 to 3 than it is the return on investment even as adults. And, you know, I know for us and OTC, I mean, we spend a lot of money, you know, training workers, and rightfully so. We're trying to upskill and move them along. But the reality is when that return on investment is greater from birth to 3 years, why are we not? So I guess, Jim, when you ask why, my answer is always why not? And I am beyond thrilled that this has gotten so much coverage and energy because we are literally doing what a lot of communities want to be doing. So I'm really, really proud of this community and to be part of it.
I think you framed the issue very well for us. I remember back on the coverage that KY3 and Springfield Susan did on this important issue, and noted we're down 700 slots in childcare centers from pre-pandemic numbers. That's a significant number, to say the least. And it's been alluded to, but childcare centers right now are 1/2 to 2/3 of capacity, again, due to staff shortages. So it's an issue that we've identified, and it can be addressed, and hopefully we'll be able to get towards that this evening. Chrissy, let's start with you and SRC, because I know that certainly it's an important issue for the SRC holding companies.
Sure. Thanks again for having us here today, and thanks to the Springfield Daily Citizen and KY3 for really the entire series that you've provided. I've learned so much, and it's been eye-opening for me and for all of our associates as we've seen the challenges, and we do face it. Obviously, from a workforce perspective, it's important that people know that their precious little people are being well cared for while they come in to work, and they can be productive. It's a challenge. The capacity is not there. And for most of our associates, we've tried several different pilots, and we've done surveys, and it seems that a lot of our associates have figured it out, obviously, or they wouldn't be there day to day. They struggle from an emergency standpoint. So the childcare provider, especially in the last couple of years, they've had to close due to a COVID exposure. Or there's just something that occurs that prevents that particular individual or that group from caring for the child. So those are some of the issues that we've struggled with, and attendance continues to be one of our biggest drivers in people being able to stay in our workforce. And we know that that's a piece of that. But I think a bigger concern for us is the number of people that aren't working right now, the participation in the workforce because they can't find childcare. And there's so many things I'd like to say. I know when they first asked me to be on the panel, my first thing was, well, don't expect me to have the solutions because I'm trying to figure this out too. But I think we're really fortunate to have this panel here, and I'm hoping to hear from all of you as well as we have an opportunity to brainstorm what solutions can we work together as a community to provide. There are state funding, there is willingness to partner. Springfield is a phenomenal place to partner. We see that over and over. So I'm excited for this conversation, and I don't want to steal all of the things. So I will go ahead and pass, but for SRC, it's huge. We have a lot of plans for continued growth. We have 10 organizations under the SRC Holdings umbrella, about 2,000 associates currently, and plans to grow continually. So in order to do that, our associates have got to have childcare that they can count on in order to be able to come to work and be productive and help us grow.
Sally and Chrissy both said it, but families generally, and certainly families at risk, adds to the workforce shortage as parents scramble to try to find affordable care. And so it's almost a vicious cycle kind of situation. Dan, what about CNH Ringman? Again, another manufacturing facility in our community.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be on the panel. I view myself a little bit as an agitator. I think I got invited because I was asking a lot of questions. But you know, for me, as we look at our strategic business plan over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, and more of an emphasis on work-life balance and people wanting more time, um, as well as that sustainable income and the opportunity for them to balance their life. How do we look at our benefits and really consider what is the most meaningful thing that we can do to attract people to our business? But then I think that expands outside of our business, but to our community. And there is no easy answer. So again, started asking a lot of questions. And is this the time and the place that as an organization we make an investment, recognizing that, you know, you saw on the video that Cox invests $1 million a year for their childcare opportunity. And the reality is that most businesses in Southwest Missouri aren't going to have that option. But if we can come together to come up with solutions that are meaningful, think about the change that that would have for the workforce. The most stressful time, Sally and I were talking, I didn't have family in town when I had pre-child or preschool age children. And as a parent, that was by far the most stressful time in my life. And we joked about the bad mommy days, like, oh, please don't need Tylenol. I've got them eating it too. And the reality is that we all did it. And I see some smiles out there, so I don't feel so bad. But but think about if we can address this issue, the stress that that takes off of the workforce in our community, and generating a safe space for our people to see that we're really investing where it matters to them. I can go on, but again, I'm sure we'll come back to that. So thank you for
Diane, thank you. And of course, you'll be on 9 and 10 o'clock news because HY3 is recording this. So you may have some explanation later, but we'll do that later.
Conversation
Yeah,
about
we understand.
moments,
We understand.
actually.
That's exactly right. That's right.
Be kind.
We saw in the video and we heard both from Ashley and Elizabeth about the wait list challenge. And it just amazes me that the wait list for childcare at licensed centers are 9 to 18 months. And I know you probably see that in spades, don't you, Jennifer, in terms of your center at OTC?
Yeah, so unfortunately, our waiting list is very, very long. We're a nationally accredited center with really high demand. We do prioritize OTC students and employees on our waiting list, but then we're open to the community if we have spots. But you know, a community member family's chance of getting in is really, really slim. One of our classrooms, the waiting list I'm calling right now, they've been on the list for 3 years. Another classroom, it's a little over a year, so it kind of depends on the age group, but a minimum of a year waiting list, and usually probably longer. So, yeah. Yeah, I would just say I'm grateful for this forum. This is something in our early childhood community in Springfield we've been talking about for years. How do we draw in the business community to see the importance of getting involved and investing in childcare and early childhood. So this is just really exciting that this event is happening. But those phone calls from families who are desperate are just something I've never experienced in my over 20 years of directing early childhood programs. It is, I just haven't experienced the crisis and the desperation there is right now for families trying to find childcare.
You use the C word, it is a crisis, no question about it. And this person to my left has lived this for many years. She's a young person, but she's a pioneer in this issue, I guarantee you. And Dana, you can tell us story upon story in terms of this situation, but what is your perspective in your opening comments this evening?
Jim, so when I started at Community Partnership of the Ozarks almost 24 years ago, my entire job was family-friendly business practices and how do you make that happen and how do you connect families to business and business to families and helping that. So finally, I can say that it's come full circle. I work with childcare providers every day. My hope is that they increase the quality that they're providing for children. I work with families every day, and I hear the stories that people tell about how desperate they are. We recently started a program that's going to help families connect to childcare, and so I'll talk about that a little bit later if you want me to. But I think that that's one of the things that opened my eyes more than anything is that if you're struggling to find care and you're desperate and you've got to go to work tomorrow, you'll settle for something less than what you really want. And that scares me. It scares me that we have families out there choosing substandard care in unlicensed homes. And that's why I still do this, because I know that there are still families out there that are they're desperate, and we owe that to them. We owe that to them to be able to be comfortable in their workplace and know that their children are cared for. And that's not always the case. And God forbid you get the phone call that you have to go home and pick up your child and take them home because they're sick. There's no, we don't have ill child care. We don't have all the things that we know. And I also had children in preschool when I didn't have family around. And so it's a desperate situation, and we should not force families to have to make those decisions. And so we're still at it.
We've heard the word crisis and we've heard the word desperate as it relates to our most precious resource, our children. And certainly I think this issue is. I remember back in the Springfield Daily Citizen KY3 coverage, and it was striking to me that a family of 4 in Greene County with 2 children spend $22,000 a year on child care. And of course, the median household income in Greene County is $47,000. So we can do the math. It just does not work. It just does not add up. Well, let's address some more questions as we have heard the opening comments from our panelists. And let me start with some softball questions. And I'll start with our business representatives, I guess, first, although anyone can add to that. But what do you think, in addition to what you said in your opening comments, what are some challenges businesses are now facing on the child care issue? I know, Chrissy, you mentioned the emergency care. Dana talked about that too, but what other challenges are there from the SRC or Diane from the CNH Remand perspective?
I would say when I look at challenges in general and I think about workforce challenges, people strategy is one of our biggest issues in general right now, because whether it has to do with childcare or, as I mentioned earlier, just the number of people that are participating in the workforce right now. This is our CEO has said often in the last few months, he's never seen a time before where we've had more customers and more business than we had people able to come in and help us actually meet those commitments to our customers. So this to me it is a crisis, and it is something that we have to be focused on. And it's one leg of the overall people talent strategy that we have to look at. What are the right benefits? How can we meet people where they are? I honestly can't imagine having a newborn, or even finding out that I was going to have a newborn and having some of that joy robbed by the fact that I wasn't sure how I'm going to have this child cared for and be able to continue my career so that I can bring money into my family and into my home so that they have the life that I want them to have. And so that's what people are facing. So the coverage that took place, actually, I received an email from one of our associates whose wife has worked in early childhood development for 30 years. And so I had the chance for her to come in, and I was able to talk to her more about that. And she echoed what Jennifer was saying about the days she cries with people on the phone because they're so desperate to try to find a place for their children to go. So from a business perspective, I know that there are state dollars. I know that there is an opportunity to partner. And whether that's partnering with other businesses, whether that's exploring opportunities for subsidies, finding childcare facilities that have capacity, if there's that funding to help get the right people in. Those are things that I am absolutely willing to explore, because we need people to come in and help us meet our customer commitments. And I mean, I'll give a bit of it. I believe we have a great place to work too, because in general, and overall, it got amazing career paths. People can come in, we have good benefits, and we have a family atmosphere. So those are things that I think as a business community, we've got to look for those solutions. But workforce is a huge challenge now in general, and this is a big piece of solving that challenge.
No, and I don't want to derail the conversations, but as we look out 3 and 5 years, individuals that have to step out of the workforce for a period of time, as we look at diversity and inclusion and bringing women into leadership. By the way, there's not enough women in manufacturing. If there's a lot of women out here, if you want to talk to me later, but there, as we look at what does an individual compromise to stay home, and what impact does that have on the business and the community? So while that's not necessarily addressing the immediate problem, it is a residual effect down the road that should be considered.
Chrissy used the phrase that we hear a lot now. We didn't hear it so many years ago, and that is meeting employees where they are. And I think that is more and more what employers are doing, and they should do. That's the right thing to do, first of all, but they have to do it from an employee development standpoint. And you have to move heaven and earth sometimes to maintain the retention of those employees as well as attract new employees. And perhaps this is an issue that is there as well. Chrissy and Diane both mentioned some opportunities. Certainly, the ones that people talk about the most, it seems to me, first of all, is of course employer-based childcare. Cox Health, an example of that. But again, that is not for everyone. Certainly, small businesses can't do that. But there is the opportunity, as you alluded to underwrite childcare costs as an employee benefit. There are some legal issues there, and as well as some issues of fairness and equity that I think have to be addressed. And then certainly providing subsidies to childcare centers to reserve slots for children of employees is yet another option that's being done in other places. So I think there's many options beyond that, but at least there are some options that people can talk about. Any of the other panelists want to address that question? Sally?
Well, I mean, we have, a large variety of employer services. We kind of meet everybody in the middle, the job seeker and the employer. And, people ask all the time, what more can I do? Employers have done a great job at raising wages, but I kind of want to talk about the provider. Again, as a business, they don't have that luxury of raising wages. So the basic principles of economics doesn't apply here. Like, you can't supply and demand your way out of it. You can't add more children to bring in more revenue to your classroom, because then your ratio goes up And I am not an advocate by any means, let me just get in on the record of lowering those ratios. I think that's dangerous and I think that's a safety issue. However, so you can't do that. And it's going to, for me, it's going to drill down to the wages of those workers. Are we making it even too expensive for someone to work when you can't afford the daycare? Now we've, made it too expensive. What are we doing? But it does drive down to wages. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to have to do something to address the wage disparity.
Yeah, I kind of want to say amen. Like yes, you're yes. So yeah, exactly right. Some people will suggest changes to the ratio regulations. That is not the answer. Just ask yourself, would you want to be carrying right now? It's 8 2-year-olds with one person. So our ratios are already pretty high in our state, but the childcare business model has always been extremely challenging, very high turnover due to very low wages. But it has now reached a breaking point where it's no longer sustainable. It's not high turnover anymore. It's no applicants. There is no one willing to work the jobs. So then, as Jim mentioned, there are many programs that aren't at capacity because they can't find workers. So it's a business model that is just no longer sustainable without a significant investment in funding to increase the wages. That's really the only answer. We also need higher quality. I received a phone call a few months ago from a panicked mother who had been on our waiting list for several months and had been in alternate care, and another baby had died that day in our community in her child's childcare situation. And so we've just got to find solutions to increase quality as well and to increase those teacher qualifications, but we can't do that without increasing wages. That has to be a piece of the puzzle for sure.
And I was just gonna, we were thinking the same thing there at the same time, but I was thinking that, if I have to make a decision between finding quality and being able to afford it, I may have to choose to afford it, and that's oftentimes not quality. And so you're forcing me as a family who has, just a limited amount of budget to pay to put to childcare to choose low quality. And low quality means sometimes the ratios are too high, there's just so many pieces of this that we cannot jeopardize quality for affordability. We just can't, because they're our most precious, beings. It can't be that way. So
You've alluded to it, but my sense is the facility infrastructure is there. I know Messiah Lutheran Church was featured on the video, and that church, of course, is providing utilities and housing. There's other churches who are doing that, willing to do that. So my sense is the facility infrastructure is there, and the religious community has stepped up, and I think would step up even more. But the issue is, again, that workforce within that facility. Okay, just wanted to reinforce that was my sense and assumption based on what you all were saying.
To add to that, you can get funding for like a lot of the CRISA and ARPA funds. Like we were able to add a classroom with that funding. So that provided some renovation money and to fully equip the classroom, but it's almost, you just can't find ongoing funding that is going to sustain wages. So that's the piece that's just really hard to fund.
And you say it can't be a one-time shot. It has to be sustainable.
yeah, and we're not at the place now as a state where we know the true cost of childcare. The true cost of childcare has been depressed so that families can afford it. And so that when we go out at a market rate survey and we ask childcare providers, what's it cost you to do business? What do you charge? We obviously they're not telling you the truth because they know that they can't charge parents what it truly costs to do the business. And so it's inaccurate when we report it to the state.
And flip that coin, the true cost of not doing childcare I think we're seeing in spades, and it's going to continue. And back to that business sense, it's a problem today, a challenge today. Probably was a few years ago, but not to the extreme and the desperation and the crisis, use those words, that it is today. So do you see the future workforce being any different than the challenge we have today?
I don't know that the future workforce is going to look any different, but if we don't change the pattern, then I think it has the potential to be worse. You know, raising wages is just the start. The reality is that everybody has an opening right now. And so it's not just about raising the wages, it's about the sustainable system that's going to be able to service our community. Um, so I think it just will exasperate.
Well, I think we're going to sit here a while. I think we're going to be here a while. And childcare, I mean, at least for workforce, transportation and childcare, historically the two biggest barriers to work. And somebody asked, well, what's different now? Well, what's different now, it's really, really hitting the core. We've got supply chain issues, production issues. We've got, the service industry has been hit. So I think what's different now, every sector has been hurt. GDP has been hurt. And we know there's a lot of people not participating in work. So, I think we're going to be here a while. COVID just exacerbated what was going to happen. We've had a population decrease, boomers retiring, and we know all that. So I think now we're in an adjustment period, but I think we're going to be here a while. So now is the time to strike and address it. Then that will help us long term.
Chrissy, something else?
Yeah, I would just add too that, so it is an issue for today's workers for sure. But when you talk about quality of care, that's our workforce of the future. And we know that early childhood development is the most critical time, right? And so if we are asking people to rely on substandard care for 0 to 5 years old, that hurts. That's not what I want for our future. I don't want that for the children of our community. And so that's just an even greater reason for us to try to find these solutions. The other thing that struck me, and I just really appreciate all the coverage that's been done, and because I think the education has been so important. But when we talk about the increase of wages and the need for that, so, yes, with $11 per hour is the average wage. And that's very low in today's standards, right? And then we require directors to have college educations for that. And it's about $14 per hour or so on average. And you can make more about anywhere, right? And so what are we going to do in order to help to incentivize young people, or any really people of any age that are looking for a career change, to incentivize them to go into this? We are so fortunate for the number of people who are working in these fields today, because it's an absolute labor of love. They're there because they care about kids, and they're willing to take the personal sacrifice on their own financial means to do this. But the system's broken, and we've got to figure out that system so that we can have the people that love doing this work actually have the fair rewards. Something that we talked about in this panel, and I'm going to look at Dana because I think you had the information for it, was that, so recently it was called out that Missouri had the lowest wages for teachers. And we saw a change in that, right? Because that was just flat embarrassing, right? And so we saw some changes in that regard. Some of the conversations we had enlightened me that some of our standards in Missouri are not up to par with other states. And so I wondered if you could share a little bit about that as well.
Absolutely. So one of the things that there was a recent study that was released on the states and how Missouri fares, and of course we fare to the bottom. We continue to rank below Arkansas and bark below, some of our neighbors. We're one of the things that they scored on was based on the fact that we don't have a quality rating system in our state. That's important to people that are ranking this industry. We pay abysmally low in child care subsidy reimbursement. And so those families have to choose the lowest quality oftentimes. We haven't figured out the foster care piece as well. If you have a foster child and you're trying to find childcare, good luck. It's incredibly difficult, and you don't have the 18 months lead time to be able to put them on a waiting list, and you don't have the opportunity to. You can't even pay the full cost of the care, and we can't charge the foster family that. So legislators in the room, we got to fix that. It's got to be fixed. It's not working. There's a lot of other things that are related to that, but those are the main ones that keep us toward the bottom.
Sally mentioned a moment ago, we're going to be here a while, and she meant that figuratively. But if you hear the rain, and if you had your KY3 weather app, you knew that at 5:40 it was going to start raining. So we are going to be here a little while because it's pouring down rain, and we need the rain, and that's going to help a lot. I think we have, and I don't want to oversimplify or jump to the conclusion, but I think we've certainly identified the issue. And we have heard loud and clear, capacity is there from a facility standpoint, more than not. But our need is increasing the wages of the child care worker. So how do we get there? What are we going to do?
Well, I have about 5 options if anybody would be so inclined. But we have been, from a local perspective, so we have been working with some childcare providers locally to do registered apprenticeships for the childcare educator. Again, it's kind of a little small drop in a big bucket of problems, but it would help the onboarding of the cost of training the educator, which then you hope in turn would alleviate a little bit of budgetary stress off the provider. So we have been working on that. Ironically, we were working with a local one, and I won't say who it is. And I called her. I'm like, hey, where are you? She goes, oh, today is my last day. I'm going back to teaching because I just can't do this anymore. So one more director of a child care center gone. So apprenticeships, again, that won't help alleviate everything, but it's a little something. If any of you are familiar with the Missouri Child Care Relief Funds, you can reach out online. They will get back to you in one day. I emailed, and his name is Jeffrey Hauser. He probably won't want me giving his name, but I will. And I have their office number, but they have several options for non-traditional care, paycheck protection, startup expansion, and enhancement. And according to him, reach out, any kind of technical assistance for the applications, just let him know. But there is that. In addition, I received a report from the state of Louisiana, a very comprehensive, complex report, but the whole state of Louisiana did a significant overhaul of their child care system with school readiness tax credit. They do use a rating. You mentioned the rating, they do use that, but there's teacher and director tax credits. There are provider tax credits, family business, and child care resource and referral tax credits. And then just last night, I have been working very closely, as all of us have, and Brian Fogel, I mean, Brian, you should really be up here too, because you are a connector and convener. And maybe like it's your fault we're all up here. I don't know, but thank you, because really, Brian, without your support, I mean, seriously, you are a huge, I mean, it's been incredible, and I can't thank you enough for your support. But we've been working with Robin Phillips at Child Care Aware. She's the CEO. It's a national organization, but she's over Missouri, and we've been working very closely. And she sent me a report late last night. We're going to talk on Friday, but the city of St. Louis, and she helped, did a pretty major ask of St. Louis City and their ARPA funding. And it was all about for a 3-year wage subsidy program. She has ran the numbers for Greene County, and I have that right here. We're going to review it. It's a little complex. But the point, for the ARPA dollars, they are here. Is it going to do anything long-term and permanent? No. But Robin's point is always, and I agree, but it'll buy us some time to keep working on a long-term solution. And then Robin and I are also, the state of Minnesota does a childcare pod model, and we have been having conversations with a local representative who's highly engaged and interested in that. And that concept is more of, we talk about how hard it is, as a provider and a business owner, when you're spent your whole day, like with 10, 15 2-year-olds, you're exhausted. And the pod model would be basically a big shell, and then the different providers would be within the pod. But you would have one person, kind of a director, that would oversee all the operational, and take that stress and burden and cost off of the individual business owner. So we are exploring that and waiting on that report from Minnesota. So there's a lot of good work out there. She is very proud of this community because we are staying engaged. And I think for me, we just can't give up. We just have to keep going.
So Sally, one of the things that I would say is with the pod model is that's going to require some licensing changes. And so we really have to be able to.
Okay, well, there is that. But
no,
I know that
I think that's why
is
we.
true.
I think we need to go there. I mean, I
But,
think
that's why we have a representative engaged in that, because he can make those legislative changes. And you're right. I wanted to put a child care center in the job center and do an on-site training. I'm like, why would you not have it? And Robin said, well, good luck getting that license. So I just kind of dropped it for now.
So and then the other thing I would say is that if the ARPA funding ask is less than $6 million, I have a plan. I have an idea. Okay. We have an option as a community that we need to revisit, perhaps legislatively again, but it's an option for us. The other thing that I would say related to that is that there's another model called the consortium model, and we talked a little bit about this, is that if you had a child care center that had 10 slots, let's say, that a business could buy the 10 slots for a year, and then you would be able to ensure that your workforce had those 10 slots. That's an option that we can look at. Probably there's some directors out there in the audience, and they probably willing to look at it tomorrow, or even if not 10 but 2, right? If you were to say that there's and then we haven't even really talked about the rural childcare and how important that is a piece of this as well that we have to look at. I'm open to all kinds of ideas, and I think that it's something that Jennifer and we work with it about every day. We talk about ideas and how would we do that. And I'm never a no, that'll never work. I'm a how do we make that work? How do we fix that? How do we make that work? So
I'm a big fan, as many of you are, of public-private partnerships. I think that has been one of our secret sauces in terms of getting solutions to problems. And I think this certainly bodes well for that. The consortium idea works. You look at the barriers to employment, certainly childcare is at probably the top of that list. Transportation is there. And very recently, of course, Community Foundation of the Ozarks has a fund to address the transportation challenges. And there's a lot of folks involved in that, but again, it's coalition, it's a partnership, it's a consortium, so to speak. So where do we begin? I mean, and I know a couple of action items. One is, I guess CPO has Early Childhood Workforce Development Committee, which is composed of both public and private, is it not? And that may be a place for the business community to step up and be involved, right?
absolutely. So Jennifer, I'm going to pitch it to you because it's your committee. We have an early care and education collaborative, and under the collaborative we have some subcommittees, and one of the subcommittees is the workforce. And Jennifer, do you chair that? Or
I
does
do
Faye?
chair that, yes. So yes, we meet the second Tuesday of every month at noon at the OTC Early Childhood Center. And we're a relatively new committee, but we've just taken on this task of the childcare workforce and how do we how do we solve that? How do we professionalize the field in our community and increase wages? And how do we engage the business community in those conversations and in those solutions?
And you need more representation from the business community. I'm willing to bet.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's yes, that we would welcome that.
Okay, there could be a call to action. That's an action item.
Yes.
Diane and Chrissy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what do you think? We talked about buying slots or sense of subsidy to improve those wages. What do you think the business community reaction would be to that?
I think it's a new concept that the business leaders really need to stop and think about. It doesn't matter how much money I put into a dependent care reimbursement account if there's no slot or no place for the employee to spend the money. So the consortium idea, I think, has a lot of merit, a lot of value. Much like Chrissy, our workforce has kind of figured it out. But it's the workforce that we're missing to fill my 23 open spots that will have the greatest impact. So I think your call to action, what do we do now? Traditionally, we compete as businesses within our community. And on this issue, this is something where I feel like we're going to have to normalize the benefit just a little bit, make the investment and build out a partnership for us to really be successful.
Diane on that. I think we've got to explore it and find ways to do it. And we need to go back and we've surveyed our associates, but we've got to resurvey and find out kind of where they are today, because even we piloted some programs during the pandemic. At that time, I think people had figured it out kind of, through friends and family and different ways. And kind of we need to go back and gather the data and see kind of where we need to make those investments. But it is hopefully the people that are watching this today that are anxious to come to work, that are looking for the solutions. We've got to find the solutions to make sure that they have a slot for their child so that we can bring them into work. And I'm happy to partner and explore, and I challenge other businesses to join us in figuring this out.
And again, I will share my bias, but my bias is the business community is a huge part of the solution. And I think the key is taking small bites of the issue. I mean, we can't solve it immediately, but certainly with some small bites and some solutions we're talking about this evening, perhaps there's an answer. I want to shift to see what questions you may have. Obviously, we have some time remaining, and I think there may be some questions out there that we would like the panel to address. And David, who has the mic that we have a online audience. So if you don't mind, we're going to ask you to use a mic so the online audience can hear that. And David will be the roving microphone, and Brian has the first question.
It's going to be
That's a surprise.
Well, first of all, thanks to everybody to shining another light on this. It's been an issue for a long, long time. Dana, thank you for your work for decades on this. Missouri, the Child Care Aware report came out, and to your point, Missouri is not only towards the bottom in quality, but we're last or we're 49th in affordability in infant care. We're 50th in 4-year-olds. So again, we have low quality and a very high price. That's a model that doesn't sell very well. And when we talk about workforce attraction to our state, if you are a family, and you know about this, you're not coming to Missouri, and we're losing our young people. I mean, we have fewer young people than we had in 2010, according to the census. So I wonder, Sally, you talked about some states that are doing this better, but are there models out there? I mean, somebody's got this figured out better than we do if we're the lowest in quality and the lowest and the highest in cost. How are other states doing this?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to the report from Louisiana.
That's good.
I mean, honestly, I mean, they kind of probably started like this, but then set up a system. And I think, again, with the injection of ARPA money, we could set up a system, but then they reevaluated. I think the first tax credit went out in 2007. Then they reevaluated in 2018, which ironically is right before, everything, well, whatever happened. but they reevaluated. But then what happened with that initial injection and reevaluating? And I think you need to reevaluate as your economy changes, because it doesn't stay the same. That led to permanent legislative financial support. And Robin will tell you, and I get emails all the time, at this time, our federal government is not funding any sort of childcare anything. So it is up to us at the state level and at the local level. So like Minnesota, I think you have to think really creatively, but any kind of innovation, I think to your point, is an economic development and attraction, because at least you can say your community, we are engaged, we are working on it, and here's some possible solutions. But, it takes a while, but we have the energy and we're ready to go.
Sally, who was the advocate? Who was the cheerleader in Louisiana that made this happen? There's usually a cheerleader.
Commissioner of Education was one of the people that was really involved.
Okay.
I mean, and honestly, it is going to take some legislative changes. To Dana's point, there just is. We can do whatever we want locally. We can subsidize the wages, but it is going to take some legislative changes, because I think that's where Missouri is falling short. I think there needs to be some changes there. The reimbursement rate is lower than many other states. If you're in government subsidies. And frankly, a lot of providers aren't taking, government subsidies anymore. And, I understand that. Again, it's their business. So there's just a lot of work to do.
You want to weigh in?
Well, I was just going to say that this is going to be a little bit of an advertisement, but Kids Win Missouri has a roadmap to success for childcare. And I left a couple of copies over there on the round table that they've got some good ideas, some things that to kind of get us going. Pennsylvania has a good model. Oklahoma has a good model. I know, go figure. There are several states. Yeah, but there are a lot of states that have got some pieces of this figured out. Yeah.
So when you say legislative changes, what is at the top of the list? A specific thing that could be changed, altered, or a new law? Give me an example.
Go ahead if you want to.
I think there's significant, listen, I'm all about, again, I am not an advocate for ratio changes whatsoever, but there are a lot of licensing restrictions. One idea I tossed out to Robin Phillips was possibly United Wave's Give 5 program. Could we use, they have hundreds of volunteers that are ready to, dive in and, support. And, she was like, okay, but that will not count towards your ratio, even if they're trained or certified or whatever. So you can't use any kind of volunteerism as a way to offset, like a cost. And then, like I said, I really wanted to put a child care center in the job center. The city of Memphis is doing that, as I learned at a recent conference. And I'm like, why can't we do it? We have the space. But again, licensing restrictions would restrict me from doing that. And, we can navigate it. It's just really, really restrictive and tough. And I don't know, Dana.
Well, the other one, and Brian, I want you to give me the high sign on this, whether or not this is what I should say. The legislation that we've had for several years. You know what I'm talking about? Well, okay, so Lincoln Hub. Yeah. So Bob Dixon first had a piece of legislation that would allow us to have a 1/4 cent sales tax that would give us $6 million a year towards early childhood. We have to get enabling legislation in order to do that, and it's a long process. But if we were to do that, we could fix your ARPA funding. It would be extension of that ARPA funding and into the future, but
Last legislative session, the General Assembly did change some of the requirements for teacher certification to help address teacher shortage in our state. So at least there is a precedent perhaps to look at maybe some changes as it relates to the childcare community.
When from an outsider looking in, you know, if you can't go out and hire the workforce or hire the skill, you have to go out and create it, right? You train it. So from the outside looking in, I see this very much as an issue towards our teacher shortage. This should be a springboard into the education system. And we need to engage people earlier and get them in the workforce. I started my first job when I was 14 working for my dad. I got a real paycheck when I was 15. And the average age now is well after the 19th birthday when people enter the workforce. So if you put that into perspective with childcare, I mean, people are coming to us for interviews that have never even babysat. Not that I'm advocating that we go to babysitters, but you understand my point. So tap in early, and we should be coming together, creating environments where we're leveraging people and the skills and programs that we have through OTC, and how do we expand that into the larger community?
We have another question over here.
Hi, so Amy Blancett, Megan Story with the Drew Lewis Foundation. We are, she's gonna co-sign.
Do a Brian interpretation.
So first of all, KY3 and Daily Citizen, especially Jackie, thank you for all that you guys have done to support us, advocate for our families. So far, good? Yeah. Okay. And and then everyone on the panel, I think all of you guys have partnered with us one way or another to also support our families. But Dana, I wanted to see if you could talk about Child Care Connect before we leave.
you pitched that to me, did you? Thank you. So we had a request when that service in our community was lost to pick that up. And so Springfield Public Schools and the Community Partnership of the Ozarks picked up the opportunity to connect families to childcare. And so we have a system in place in the state called Childcare Aware of Missouri, which allows you to search childcare in our community. However, you just search everyone in the book because you don't know who has openings and who does not. And so we have reached out to childcare providers in our community and asked them to give us your current availability of, how many slots do you have in infant toddler care? How many twos you have? And they've sent that back to us. We have about 45 or 50 right now who have shown us their what they have in availability. They don't all have slots, but they've all reached out and said, here's what I have right now. And so we are going to keep that up until the state decides to pick it up and do it for us. But we've had 16, I think, families reach out so far and said, I'm looking for care. We've been able to connect them to care. And so it's working on a small basis. I'm figure it'll explode here soon. And we're doing connections in Greene, Christian, Webster, and Polk counties. So in the general area. And so if you need it, you can get on our website, fill out a form that says, what are you looking for? And then we have providers who are every day. I got 3 today of programs, and 2 of them had openings. And so we're trying to connect people to openings.
Yeah, there you go. Great initiative, and certainly
I need
again, an
help.
example
Somebody-
of small bites on the issue, because that's key. Another question over here.
Okay, thanks again. I'm not more of a question, but just tried to be a small solution. I've met with Dana and Jennifer and a new owner of a childcare center here in Springfield. And it was as a mom that had a need. And so we are a new drop-in childcare center here in Springfield. We are for the emergency family that our first day sitter or nanny canceled and mom still had to go to work. And that was our first day, our first story of our mom whose husband works away, no family here. She has 4 kids, and I get it. So we are open and available and willing to partner with businesses, especially we're open late. We're open to 8 p.m. We're open on Saturdays, and we're really just trying to be that gap for the families that have the emergency or the family who's on a wait list and can't get in so that they can go to work because we do have slots open and available. So just want to put that out there as a more of a solution and not just a question. So
And what's the name of your?
Thank you very
facility?
much.
yes, I know. It's Kids In Child Care Center, INN, and we are on the south side of Springfield. We are a licensed facility. We are hourly care, and hourly care exemptions did get rescinded as we were getting licensed, but we were able to still go forward. So yes, just wanted to give my
Thank
pitch.
you.
Thank you for your comment very much. Next question. Who has the next question? Okay, one more, and then we're going to start winding down here in a minute. Caitlin.
Yeah, so this is perhaps more of a long range question and maybe is something I'm just kind of hoping for some clarification, maybe from the business owners more than anything. But as we know that childcare primarily still falls to women and that women are the ones who are generally stepping out of the workforce to take care of their children when they can't afford that care. Is there any value in thinking long range more on workforce development and reaching young women faster and getting them into professional tracks even quicker, where when they have their children, maybe they could afford to pay more for childcare and kind of help that cycle in terms of being able to pay those workers more in those centers as well? That I don't think that's a question we can answer here either, but it did occur to me while I was sitting here. Is that something, as much as we focus on workforce development, is there still sort of a gender gap there in what we're doing locally?
Yeah, I think it's a great example of something that we need to dig into because that's an education point, right? When we talk with but I know that we're fortunate to get to go talk in schools often. And so that needs to be one of our points because as Diane mentioned earlier, we do want to see more diversity in our organizations, especially in operations and production and so forth. And so because that's where we do a lot of promotion from within. And so individuals that really understand those parts of our organization then have a leg up to as they rise within the organizations too. And as a business, and as we look at opportunities for partnerships with OTC and scholarship factors and those kind of things, I think that's just a really valid point for us to continue to consider. I had one other comment I wanted to make too, because I think we've identified a lot of things that we would like our legislators to really focus on and work on. And I appreciate the stats that you had there, Brian. That was very helpful in that. But I also want to highlight, Sally had mentioned that Early Connections program and the funding that's available that the state has allocated. And I do think our current administration has made a bold move to allocate a lot of dollars for us to try to figure this out. So I want to balance it and make sure that we're not only highlighting the negatives. I think there's some things that we as businesses in the community need to better understand what that is. How do we access those funds? How do we work together and partner? And I appreciate the focus that our administration has put on that as well.
So let me ask just a general question. Any of the panelists may want to respond. What's the question that hasn't been asked that you were afraid would be asked tonight? Go ahead, Chrissy.
I sit here, so we have looked at this for years, and we have associates that every year I get multiple emails from associates that say, when are we going to start a child care center? How are we going to solve this? And just last year, or maybe it's probably been 2 years ago now, one of our associates left and started her own child care and takes care of other associates' children. And that's helped. That she and her husband both worked for SRC and she kind of provided her own solution. So the biggest thing that I look at, and I know we've got to figure this out and we've got to find a solution and we haven't found it yet. Some of our challenges are that we have multiple locations. So it's what's the best place to put? Yes, it'd be great to have a facility right there. We have 10 companies. So where's right there? That's going to be the best central location for our associates. So I think it's more of, my biggest concern is going back and making sure we stay true to this and find some solutions that we can provide out to our associates.
I know your company is big on succession planning, as it should be. I think you just identified a retirement plan for Jack and Betsy Stack.
Oh, Betsy will love that, and so will Jack.
We'll see. We'll see.
I'll let them know.
Okay. It is the bewitching hour very quickly, but let's go down the row for any last comments and focus on the call to action. What's the low hanging fruit? What's the call to action we need to do right now? Dana?
Business, call us. Childcare is willing to partner. I think that they are eager for solutions, and I know for a fact we did a survey actually, and there were 25 or 26 business or childcare providers who said, yes, I'm interested in partnering with business. Call me. So
I would say two things. One is legislative advocacy. So Dana mentioned, the local sales tax. Having the Springfield business community advocate for that would be tremendous, would be huge. So, so that is one. Getting involved with our workforce development committee. I think the other thing is just businesses asking the question with their leadership, what can we invest in childcare for our employees? If it's a small business, it's a small amount. If it's a big business, maybe it's a bigger amount, but really making that shift to viewing it as a really important recruitment and retention tool for employees and asking what investment are we willing to make for that. And then if it's, yes, we're going to start our own childcare center. We're going to, or we need to start with a smaller step, contacting Dana or I and getting involved in the conversation of where to start.
I have an actual ask of the providers. So, as we talk about matching and employers willing to subsidize slots, I told Dana I had reached out to a couple of providers, because I was trying to put a cost to give back to Diane so she would know, what kind of budgetary cost, this would be. And I told Dana, I was like, wait, what? No. Like when the providers gave me their wages of what they were paying, I was like, wait, no, like I want to be competitive. But to Dana's point, I think there's, a little bit of fear there about providing kind of maybe a wish list of what they would like, but really good competitive wages. So I would ask, when we do possibly do some employer matching, the employer's going to have to know how much those slots are going to cost. And I would just ask to, put it out there and give them a good competitive, not to like push you over your budget, but a good competitive wage that will actually sustain those childcare providers and a realistic look about what is competitive.
Well, and to that point, I think we have to have real conversation. I have asks all the time that my leadership says, oh, you cannot have that. Or if you want to save for that over the next 3 years, we'll talk about it then. So when you say, what's my budget? I don't know. What are you offering? Right. So I think it's about having real conversations and tough conversations. And then, so that would be my first ask. Let's have real conversations. And then my second is, how can I help? I mentioned that I felt like I was a bit of an agitator. I don't have the solution, but I can ask a lot of questions and hopefully come with a solution. So that would be my question is now as a community, how do we come together and where do I go so that I can help?
So I think some is that this conversation has to continue and we have to have the right people at the table to continue it and then take some action. And the actions we take first may not be the right solutions, right? But we have to be willing to take some actions so that we can start to make progress. And in addition to me learning more about where my associates are today and what they need and or maybe what they wish they had, if you had that perfect scenario for them, somehow we have to find out what are the needs of those who would really like to come to work if we have the right solutions for them. And I will take as many of them in manufacturing as want to come, but there are all kinds of industries and that we need to be able to provide that for. So I think we've got some fantastic people in this room that probably have means and ways of starting to collect that information. And I think that's part of the next steps in this so that we can make a difference.
This was to end at 6:30, and if you'll see your watch, it's 6:30, so it's probably time we call this to a halt. I still believe, and it's been said, the business community is a huge part of the solution. And I think there are some bite-sized pieces that can make a difference. Chris, you mentioned you need the right people at the table to continue the discussion and dialogue, and she's right. But I think we have the right people at the table this evening that really have addressed this issue. Help me thank these panelists for the tremendous job they did this evening. Thank you all very much. And thank you for being here this evening. We appreciate it. More to come.